Good evening. I'm Bill Curtis, and on behalf of tonight's chairs, Francie Harrington and Andres Ordonez, our honorary chairs, Mayor Lori Lightfoot and First Lady Amy Eshelman, and Governor J.B. and First Lady M.K. Pritzker, welcome to this year's Chicago Public Library Foundation Awards. We are so grateful to be able to include all of you in this special annual celebration of bold stories, bold voices, our bold Chicago Public Library, especially as we look forward toward the 150th anniversary next year. To our live audience here at the UIC Forum, and to those of you joining us from across Chicago nationwide and from around the world, welcome. Since the year 2000, the Chicago Public Library Foundation Awards have honored creatives who enrich our collective experience and understanding of the world. These visionary artists construct stories that nourish us, collect us, and inspire us to act. Tonight, we continue to honor the legacy of these creators while celebrating stories from our tables to theaters to TikTok. In honoring Sherman Dilla Thomas, we celebrate the way our collective histories shape our city. In honoring Rick Bayless, we celebrate our culinary arts community. In honoring Tony Kushner as our 2022 Carl Sandburg Literary Award honoree, we celebrate the theater and film communities. And at the center of it all, we're here to celebrate how the Chicago Public Library Foundation accelerates our Chicago Public Library through meaningful investments of nationally recognized programs and above and beyond initiatives. We turn our attention now to a message from Chicago Public Library President and CEO, Brenda Langstraat Bowie, and Chicago Public Library Commissioner, Chris Brown.
Thank you, Bill. I'm joining you from the beautiful Chinatown Library branch, and welcome everyone who is tuning in from Chicago and around the world. For more than 20 years, the Library Foundation Awards has been a platform for authors and artists and library champions to share stories that are bolder than we could ever imagine. Stories they were born to tell. In 2020, the Library Foundation Awards boldly shifted from an only in-person event to a broadcast experience for anyone in Chicago and around the world. In 2021, a record 8,500 people tuned into the broadcast of our awards presentation, and in doing so, engaged in our growing Library Foundation community. Every year, our honorees share their stories, including how their experience in public libraries have shaped and transformed their work. And in sharing their stories, they inspire each of us, library champions and supporters like you, to share what libraries mean to all of us. Together, we fuel programs that close the academic opportunity gap, programs that bridge the digital divide, programs that activate creativity and connect us to our communities. You make it possible for the library to be bold. You activate our libraries as community hubs. There is something uniquely bold and empowering about the way that we learn in libraries. And the library brings us together to activate change. By joining our Library Foundation community, you are part of this transformative work, and every dollar activates change and strengthens our city's 81 library branches. I want to say congratulations to our honorees, Tony Kushner, Rick Bayless, and Sherman Dilla Thomas. May their stories inspire you to get involved with your public library. Enjoy the 2022 Library Foundation Awards, and please share this broadcast with your friends and family.
Thank you, Brenda. And thank you to our entire Chicago Public Library Foundation and funding community. Your support enables us to be the bold and responsive library today's Chicagoans deserve. Now, many of you know this story, how after the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, poet Carl Sandburg described Chicago as a city shoveling, wrecking, planning, building, breaking, and rebuilding. And it was through this rebuilding that we laid the foundation of our great Chicago Public Library, with each generation adding to our story. So it's here on the eve of our 150th anniversary that we want to celebrate you, this generation of builders who are so committed to our mission of providing equitable access to information, ideas, and lifelong learning. It's through your support that we can continually and boldly raise the bar of not just what libraries can be here in Chicago, but nationally and internationally. We did this in 2019 when Chicago Public Library became the largest library in the country to go find free. This impacted over 100,000 youth who previously had blocked accounts. Now I want us to stop and take a moment to think about what this means when a person, young or old, is told they're not welcome or can't access one of the cornerstones of their neighborhood. That's why Find Free is such a big deal. And I want to thank Mayor Lightfoot for her unwavering support of this important initiative. Also, thanks to the mayor's support, we've added Sunday hours to all 81 library locations. During the pandemic, we expanded operations, and our staff made sure that our communities had access to critical resources, such as broadband. For this, I want to especially thank our amazing team of more than 1,000 CPL staff. And we continue to build on these successes. Starting this year, the library is partnering with Chicago Public Schools to empower our next generation by providing library access to all 330,000 CPS students. This Student Success Card, as we call it, will guarantee early access to library books, ebooks, databases, and homework help for all students and teachers in the CPS community, and will be the foundation for the future of youth in Chicago. But we're not stopping there. At a time when books across the country are being challenged and banned at unprecedented rates, we're reminded of just how critical our public libraries are to our democracy. That's why, with the support of our foundation, we've doubled down on our freedom to read, selecting Art Spiegelman's Mouse, one of the most frequently challenged books, as our 2022 One Book, One Chicago selection. And to highlight this national conversation even further, we've partnered with the Astor Gates, last year's Library Foundation awardee, to create the world's first book sanctuary art installation at our Harold Washington Library Center. His art will act as a visible testament to our city's freedom to read. Of course, we can only take these bold steps because our city library has such a powerful partner in the Library Foundation and in each and every one of you whose commitment and support empowers us, not just to build, but to push the bounds of what a library can be. So on behalf of our library users, our 1,000 staff, I want to thank you for your support. We're 150 years young, and we're still just getting started.
Now I'm pleased to welcome Dave Casper to the stage, the U.S. Chief Executive Officer of tonight's presenting sponsor, BMO. Dave is also an extraordinary civic leader and has served on our Library Foundation's board for over a decade. Dave Casper. Again.
We were wondering at our table if Bill was born with that voice or if he's been taking lessons. And he said he was born with it, and Donna has confirmed it. I wish I had that voice. So on behalf of all my colleagues at BMO, we are absolutely delighted to be, again, the presenting sponsor for the Chicago Public Library. We know at BMO that having a strong public library, a bold public library that does things that other libraries don't do, is absolutely one of the key secret successes of our city. And as the First Lady said, and as I know the mayor knows, it is one of the reasons that this is the greatest city in the world. And we couldn't be more proud to be part of that. So, Bill, if you'll join me, every year I like to lead us in raising a glass together with a toast for this wonderful.
Wait just a minute, okay? Don't you think you should leave the toast to the professional?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course, one of our honorees, the great, world famous Rick Bayless.
With a bottle of Tanger in my hand. Okay, so what we have here is the famous Tupelo margarita from Frontera, topped off with a little bit of beautiful champagne, because I have to say, even champagne tastes better when you have a little tequila. Okay? Now we're ready for a toast.
The Frontera, that is a shameless promotion.
It is shameless promotion. Yes, I acknowledge that.
But whoever's promoting, I'm in.
Okay.
So I think it's actually the BMO Fontana. I can do shameless too.
Okay, you can.
Thank you. So seriously, here is to empowering the voices of everyone, everywhere, through the power of our public libraries. And to tonight's honorees, telling bold stories in bold ways. Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.
Rick, thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you, Bill. And now it is my honor to start the awards presentation with a video introducing the 21st Century Award honoree, Sherman Dilla Thomas.
The fiercest rivalry in Chicago isn't between the North Side and the South Side. No, it's in answering the timeless question of who's got the best beef.
It's your favorite neighborhood historian, Dilla, and as you know, Chicago is the greatest city on earth.
Sherman Dilla Thomas cannot answer that question, but he can tell you where Chicago's famous Italian beef comes from.
Street peddlers would set up shop outside of different blue-collar job sites with their cold sandwiches for lunches for the workers.
And many, many more facts and history about the Second City.
The first football game under the name Soldier Field will be played, of course, by Army versus Navy. Johnson Publishing Company headquarters was the only African-American-owned skyscraper in the city. It was at that trial that the beer riots kicked off on April 12, 1855.
From the origins of the fireman's pole,
George Reed used the wooden pole that was used to hold up the hay to slide down to the first floor.
to where the sacred Chicago tradition of dibs started.
Fast forward to January of 1967, where a record of 23 inches of snow fell on Chicago.
Your favorite neighborhood historian is sharing the hidden backstory of Chicago on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube.
Diagonal streets in Chicago outdate the street grid by tens of thousands of years, and they were created by the Native Americans who originally inhabited the land.
Born out of a desire to educate his daughter on the lesser-known histories of the city, Thomas's social media stories are changing the way we think about education with technology.
I got my love of history from my father. He was a Chicago police officer. He loved history and kind of shaped how I view the city, so I'm hoping that I'm passing that on to my kids and others.
With hundreds of posts racking up millions of views, Sherman's following continues to grow. And with it, countless Chicagoans are learning just how much they don't know about their city.
I think if you understand the history of the space, you treat that space better.
For his work educating the people of Chicago, and for setting the record straight on Chicago pizza,
Real Chicago pizza looks like this.
we present the 21st Century Award to Sherman Dilla Thomas.
That was a great video. Can I borrow that to put on my page? Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the Chicago Public Library Foundation. Thank you to the amazing city of Chicago. I'm truly, truly honored. If I've said it once, I've said it probably a million times at this point. Everything dope about America comes from Chicago, and I'm just trying to prove that. Thank you. Forget about the outside for a minute, just talking to Chicagoans. We have to do a better job of how we view ourselves and our image. We invented commodities trading, right? That's something that comes from Chicago. I don't see us talking about it enough. And while who you pray to is absolutely none of my business, what I do know is that if you're having a really, really bad day and the right gospel song comes on, it's gonna lift you up. And better still, if you're having an amazing day and the right gospel song comes on, well, now you're gonna have more pep in your step, right? And gospel music genre comes from this city, the greatest city on earth, right? And we should talk about that more. I remember, my parents are no longer with us, but if they were, I would be bothering my mom right now because I would get in trouble for going to libraries. She would tell me to stay on the block when we went outside, but I would sneak to the library branch that was on 79th and Loomis, and I would do so to learn Chicago facts. Maybe in your house, if you know how to dance, your father will let you stay around when he has his adult friends. But in my house, you had to know history and you had to know Chicago history. The first time you did not speak correctly, you were asked to leave the room. And so it was at that library branch that I learned Halsted Street was named for two brothers that never been to Chicago once, right? And it was also at that library that I learned that the Chicago Union Stockyard, founded on Christmas Day in 1865, is one of the reasons why the Union won the war is because we were able to feed the troops, right? Because we invented meat packing. And though you may want to give the credit of the assembly line to Detroit, that would be incorrect because it's our disassembly line that taught Henry Ford the assembly line, right? And these lessons need to be taught with the newest tools available. As I think about all the African-American freedom fighters that have came through Chicago and changed the world, people like Ida B. Wells and others, they use the newest tool available. And so right now I'm using TikTok and Instagram to promote to the world, again, that everything dope about America comes from Chicago. Thank you very much.
Man, Dylan. Billy, you just taught us more history than anybody in this room knows. You were on Wait, Don't Tell Me, and Peter Sagal and I forgot to give you your award. You did very well. So here it is. It was an NPR tote bag. Well, I'm sorry, there's something in it. You want to take that? Oh, yeah. It says Sherman Dilla Thomas, the 21st Century Award. I knew you would do it. I knew.
Thank you.
You make us proud. As they say, we're going to be seeing a lot more of that young man. Now for the second award of the evening, the Chicago Public Library Foundation's Arts Award celebrates the power and impact of Chicago's artists right here in our own community and around the world. And tonight, we honor the culinary arts and chef, Rick Bayless.
You guys will be out of business in 6 months. Words uttered by the first guest at Chicago's Frontera Grill on the day it opened in 1987. Within 6 weeks, the New York Times would be writing articles on Frontera's founder, Chef Rick Bayless, and the success of his take on authentic Mexican cuisine. Having written best-selling books, produced and starred in hundreds of television programs, and received a truly staggering number of culinary awards, we can safely say that in this case, the customer was not right. From mole to salsa, tacos, guacamole, carnitas, and countless other delectable recipes, Chef Rick Bayless has brought his take on authentic Mexican cuisine to tables all around America. His landmark books, Authentic Mexican and Rick Bayless's Mexican Kitchen, changed the way at-home chefs and fine dining connoisseurs thought about Mexican food. Through his seminal PBS program, Mexico One Plate at a Time, he took us to the street carts and kitchens that embodied the true spirit of Mexican cuisine. And the book form of the show remains a staple in the library of any chef who values authentic regional dishes. His Frontera Grill is present on store shelves, in airports, and even in Disney World. And his Michelin star-winning restaurant, Topolobamba, is a must-visit for any Chicago foodie. And at 250,000 subscribers and growing, his immensely popular YouTube channel brings burgeoning chefs new secrets and recipes every week. Whether on screen or on the page, Chef Rick Bayless's passion for Mexican cuisine is exceeded only by his exuberance for sharing it with the world. And in doing so, he stokes not just our craving for authentic meals, but also our appreciation for the community that great food fosters everywhere it is made.
When you gather a family around a table, you bring a lot more than just food, but that's the catalyst for bringing people together, creating community.
For his contributions to culinary and cultural education, and for the finest margaritas in the city of Chicago, we present the Arts Award to Chef Rick Bayless.
Thank you all so very much. Thank you to the Chicago Public Library Foundation for this incredible honor. I want to say that libraries have been a major part of getting me to where I am today. And I was just thinking about it all day today, thinking what would it be like to grow up in this era and what perhaps a library would have meant to me. And I thought about I grew up in a very middle-class family. We probably would have had one computer in our house, and my brother would have been on it all the time playing World of Warcraft. And I wouldn't get on it to do the kind of investigations that I would like studying about foods of different countries. So I still probably would have gone to a library. Like I grew up going to the Belle Isle Public Library in Oklahoma City, and it was like a refuge for me. And if it were today, I probably would use one of the computers in the library. We didn't have computers back then. And so I sat in front of this one shelf of international cookbooks. And every year during my summer break, I would choose one of the books, the international cookbooks, and I would study it. I would read it over and over again, not just for recipes, but for a glimpse at culture. And then I would make a meal for my family. Yes, they sat through these meals that I made when I was in grade school. But I would go on my bicycle to stores around the neighborhood to see if they had different kinds of ingredients. And I would amass those things. I would make these dishes and I would put them out, and without ever leaving our house, I could travel to another country. And because I had spent so much time in the books, what I was eating had such stories connected with it. And those are the stories that I would tell at the table. The books that you have on your tables this evening that are one of my very first book, Authentic Mexican. And I took what I had learned in those early days with those international cookbooks from the Belle Isle Public Library, and I turned that into a way of investigating another country and really developed a way of getting into the regional foods of Mexico. And that book that you have is really straight from my library experiences. I wanted to create one of those books that I had spent so much time with. So Authentic Mexican is the end of 5 years of my wife and I living in Mexico and traveling to every single state in the Mexican Republic, cooking with local cooks, telling their stories, collecting recipes that we could then translate into something people could do in the United States, and then we could do in our restaurants as well, just to give that glimpse of culture, of storytelling that you get through flavor. So without having had that opportunity to be part of a library culture, I'm not sure I ever would have gotten to where I am today. And I do thank my family for suffering through all those different meals that I made. But I love libraries, I love books, I love holding books in my hand, because when I'm holding in my hand, I can open them and look at photos in a way that I can't do when they're online. And I feel like that I have some easy way to take a trip, to travel. And that's what libraries mean to me, is a way to travel to another place, to enrich my life without really ever leaving home. Again, a huge thank you to the Chicago Public Library Foundation. I'm incredibly honored by this award. Thank you. Oh my goodness. My goodness. I didn't expect you here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So surprise. Good evening, everyone. I've been sitting in the wings, savoring the moment. But I know you were expecting Bill Curtis, but of course, that's not who I am, and no one could fill Bill's big, iconic shoes. But I'm here as the mayor to present tonight's Arts Award to somebody who is so incredibly special to our city. Tonight is a celebration of the Chicago Public Library Foundation, but with this award, we celebrate Chef Rick Bayless. Let's give him another round of applause.
Thank you.
Chef, by honoring you, we recognize that you were among the first chefs to truly elevate Chicago's famous and diverse food scene. You have personally stepped up to represent the city around the world. And in turn, you have brought the cuisine of the world here to Chicago. And I want to make sure that everyone knows that not only is he an iconic chef and all of the accolades that are well-deserved, but his philanthropy also helps local farmers, aspiring chefs, the many students that you have empowered through the work that you've done through the hatchery, and local performing artists, and so many others across our city. We are truly lucky in Chicago that you have made this city your home. And so it's with great pride that I present you with the Chicago Public Library Foundation's 2022 Arts Award. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. I think we're going to go this.
Thank you, Mayor, and congratulations to Rick. I think we all know that Chicago is the best big city, right? It's official. Thank you, Condé Nast. But Rick, you helped make what we all know to be true, that Chicago is the best big city to eat in. And of course, we're here tonight celebrating one of the best big city libraries in the world. I'm really reminded of how our foundation and donor community make that possible, how our exceptional library staff and community partners allow us to be bold through programs that connect and empower and inspire Chicagoans at every age and stage of life. So to the people in this room and our library supporters watching in Chicago and around the world, we want to thank you. It's through your engagement and generosity that we can ensure every generation has their Chicago Public Library story. And speaking of stories, as you've heard tonight, in 2023, we are turning 150 years young, with so many stories and people to celebrate. Advocates for inclusivity and representation, like our first African-American library director, Vivian G. Harsh, and Cindy Pritzker, who created our Library Foundation, the community that we're in together with tonight. So we're gonna be celebrating you, how for the past 150 years and today, we're leading from the library together.
Thank you, Commissioner. This annual award celebration is a reminder that our library stories are bold and have the power to connect us all. So as Commissioner Brown said, to our supporters here tonight and to the thousands of you who are viewing from around the world, thank you for being a part of this community. We've heard so many of these stories already tonight about the impact of the library programs that our donors like you make possible. And certainly, Chris and I could talk about this all day long, but don't take it from us. Let us introduce you to Melody Farmer, our teacher in the library for more than 20 years at the Whitney Young branch. And here's her story.
Our classrooms, we know, are overcrowded. Certain times, students are overlooked. But when they get a chance to come to the Chicago Public Library and have a teacher that they can work with one-on-one. So that Dolphin uses echolocation to tell the difference. That builds a special relationship, and it really helps students love school. Erica, you knocked the entire packet out. Done. A former principal told me about a program helping kids after school. Came in, applied for the program, and I just fell in love with the branch. Told the branch manager at the time, I'm like, don't interview anyone else. I want this job. What keeps me here is the people. I think it's that rapport I built over the years with the different families and the community. I see them, coming in at first graders, and I'm invited to graduations and, birthday parties and these special events that happen. So, and they just include me, A big thank you to the Chicago Public Library Foundation for the wherewithal to have a program like this in our community to help students.
Melody is here with us tonight. Melody, will you please stand so we can thank you? See, together we make programs like this possible, and stories like Melody's are countless. As we've heard tonight and the First Lady mentioned, this is an unprecedented time for expanded access in our city's library. Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot and Commissioner Brown, for making this happen. From Sunday hours to Find Free to the very cool 81 Club, giving every public school student library access for the first time. So many of you know in this room what a big deal this is. And this lift has happened for our city's students. So now, as the foundation community, this is what we do. We have the extraordinary opportunity to turn that access that has been created into acceleration. Every dollar fuels programs that transform lives. Every dollar creates more of these library stories. This is how partnership works. And we have quite a track record in our generous donors launching and sustaining programs that become national and then international models. So what we're able to create in Chicago goes well beyond our city and for the greater good of the entire library sector. This awards experience is now part of this model, as thousands will tune in worldwide. So I invite each of you to consider a gift at any level. To all of you in the room here tonight, as I mentioned, there are envelopes on the table if you feel so led. And for those of you who are watching this broadcast, we have a link in the description. And overall, we are just so grateful that you are part of this community. You make more possible, and together we will invest in our library's future and build on this very important moment for the library movement. And now, our 2022 Carl Sandburg Literary Award. From Toni Morrison, Salman Rushdie, George R.R. Martin, to Margaret Atwood and Joyce Carol Oates, to Amy Tan, and to Chicago's own Scott Turow, and so many more. For more than 20 years, we have honored authors and visionaries. And tonight, we celebrate Tony Kushner.
Common advice on storytelling is to write what you know. This year's Carl Sandburg Literary Awardee has a different opinion.
When people say write what you know, I think the first question should be, how do you know what you know? You say write what you know, aren't you really sort of saying write what you're sort of lazily conscious of knowing, as opposed to what you probably know that you don't realize you know?
If anyone would know, it would be Tony Kushner. It would be difficult to overstate the importance of Angels in America.
Are you a homosexual?
Oh, is it that obvious? Yes, I am. What's it to you?
The multi-Tony Award and Pulitzer Prize-winning play engages a wide variety of social and political issues, from homosexuality and the AIDS crisis in the United States to Reaganism and the Cold War.
It afflicts mostly homosexuals and drug addicts.
Mostly hemophiliacs are also.
Homosexuals and drug addicts. So why are you implying that I am?
And remains one of the most important dramatic works of the 20th century.
I came to forgive, but all I can do is take pleasure in your misery, hoping I'd get to see you die more terrible than I did, and you are.
It was further adapted into an Emmy Award-winning HBO miniseries.
Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm dead.
You're not dead, boy. You're a sissy. You love me. That's moving. I'm moved. It's nice to be loved.
The success of the screen adaptation would be prophetic as he would expand into Hollywood, writing and co-writing films with Steven Spielberg. Historical dramas Munich.
Come on, you're a Jew, you're a stranger. It's written someplace or other that I'm meant to ask you to come and break bread with me.
And Lincoln, about the life of the 16th president.
I suppose it's time to go. Though I would rather stay.
A retelling of the musical classic West Side Story.
I'm here to keep the civil peace until the last building falls. And if you boys make trouble on my turf, Riff, hand to heart, you're headed to an upstate prison cell for a very long time.
And the upcoming The Fabelmans, a semi-autobiographical film on the life of Steven Spielberg, is already receiving widespread critical acclaim.
Doubt is the necessary concomitant to all faith, and doubt is what we go to church or temple or the mosque to address.
He has continually pushed both the stage and screen to not just tell stories.
You have no right to do this!
But to use their work to explore the unknown.
Okay.
And to usher us forward in conversation about life.
You. The only part of the real world I wasn't allergic to.
About each other.
And if you think that I'm going back home to Puerto Rico with 6 kids that I put to bed hungry every night, amor de mi vida, you are dreaming.
And what it means to be human.
You can't answer that question, but that's where you start, and you all hold hands together and you walk out into the dark.
For his immense contributions to the theater, the cinema, and for holding our hand as we walk into the dark, we present the Carl Sandburg Literary Award to Tony Kushner.
It is Chris and my honor on behalf of the Chicago Public Library and the Foundation to present the Carl Sandburg Literary Award to Tony Kushner. Tony. Now we turn this portion of the program to Scott Simon, who will lead tonight's conversation. Scott is one of America's most admired writers and broadcasters, host of NPR's Weekend Edition, and a dear friend of the Chicago Public Library and the Foundation. Scott.
I hope you'll give me a moment when we begin. Firstly, what a great honor it is to interview Tony Kushner here and to have him follow in the tradition of previous wonderful award winners. I want to associate myself totally with what Dilla and Rick Bayless said. This is the greatest city in the world. And everything great runs through Chicago. And I am inevitably reminded tonight of when my wife and I, Caroline, who's here tonight, brought our first daughter home from China, and we landed in Chicago. I get a little weepy. And we went through customs, and there are families from Africa and families from Eastern Europe and families from Central America. And they finally called our name Simon family, which was the first time we'd heard it. And we came through, and the man in the Smokey Bear hat looked at our paperwork and said, "Okay, Simon family, when you pass that line behind me, your little girl is going to be a citizen of the United States." And then he put his hand on her head and said, "Welcome home, sweetheart." Oh. And this city has said that to people from all over the world for decades. That's what makes this the greatest city in the world. Look, and that's the same daughter I was going through her bedroom. She's away in college. I took this book down. I'd hoped she would read it. It's a great book, Marie Sandoza's Cheyenne Autumn. I opened it and found this. Oh, mercy. 1973, but providentially, I also found a poem that had been left on Carl Sandburg's laptop. I don't know if a lot of you know Carl Sandburg wrote on a laptop. Come on, I'm a journalist, all right? I know what I'm... Hog butcher for the world, tool maker, stacker of wheat, city that forgives library fines. They tell me you are wicked, and I believe them, for I've seen people lifting books from shelves. And they tell me you are crooked, and I answer, yes, I have seen they do not stop to check out books as they should. Sandburg ends by saying, so I turn once more to those who sneer at this, my city, and say to them, come and show me another city with lifted head singing so proud to forgive library book fines. So, Commissioner, we have this book. How hard was it, Tony, to get Angels in America made? Given the era, the early 1990s, given what was going on in this country, given prejudice, bigotry, how difficult was it to get this story told?
Well, writing it was hard, but I find writing hard all the time, always. And in fact, the first part of Angels sort of flowed out fairly easily. The second part, when I realized that it was going to be a very long play, and that I had written a pretty good play for the first part, I sort of intimidated myself, and it was hard to write, a lot harder to write the second part. It wasn't very hard to get it produced. It was actually done on commission from a theater in San Francisco, the Eureka Theater. And I found it, there was a very responsive and receptive audience for it in San Francisco, and then it got picked up by the National Theatre in London, and it got a great review in the New York Times from Frank Rich, who had really hated my first play, but he really liked my second one, and then after that, things just sort of happened. So it wasn't a particularly huge struggle. I think about somebody like Larry Kramer, who died last year, who wrote Normal Heart, really in the middle of the worst part of the AIDS epidemic, and the clarity and objectivity that Larry brought to that very extraordinary play, while living through the history that he was writing about, is something that really astounds me. I wrote Angels in the late 80s, so it was a little bit of a backward glance, not by many years, but by a few years, and I've always found that I needed to look back a little bit. I feel like I'm disappointing you. I don't have any heroic war stories. It was very, very long, and I had to cut a lot of it. And I ate a lot of chocolate chip cookies and gained an enormous amount of weight, and then had to diet and lost 100 pounds after the first.
It's all part of the creative process.
And that was a struggle. It's not exactly heroic, but it is. There you are. So.
It doesn't disappoint
me. That's the best I can do.
I got to tell you, I wasn't expecting the chocolate chip cookies anecdote, but this is good to know.
Like every day, a gallon of, I'm ashamed to say this now, but like a gallon of Coke and a box of Entenmann's chocolate chip cookies. One good thing, by the way, that didn't come, I love Chicago. I really love Chicago. Angels in America, the national tour was launched here. The way that the play was treated in Chicago made me fall madly in love with the city. Everything except my last play has been produced in Chicago in really wonderful productions, and it's one of the great theater cities on earth, and it's one of the great cities on earth. But I think Entenmann's chocolate chip cookies did not come from Chicago. I think it came from New York. Am I wrong about that? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Probably he baked them in Chicago and then brought them to New York.
That's what happened. You're learning the territory.
I ate a lot of chocolate chip cookies and I drank a lot of Coke to write that play. I used to say I'm eating for 8 because there are 8 characters in the play. And I gained an enormous amount of weight. Many years later, there was an exhibit in San Francisco about angels at a museum in San Francisco, and they asked if what kind of artifacts I could send them and I said I have the desk that I wrote it on. I found this red Formica table on the street in Brooklyn, and I dragged it up to my apartment, and I wrote the play on it, and I still have the table. So I said, you could have that if you want. And they said, great. So they shipped it and put it in a museum, and when I went to see the exhibit, they had strewn the top of the desk with Entenmann's chocolate chip cookies. And I thought, there you go.
Roy Cohn, of course, is a character. He's dying of AIDS, which he refuses to recognize. Ethel Rosenberg sings to him. I've thought of Roy Cohn a lot in recent years in something that he says on stage. He says, you don't know all what I know. I don't know what all I know. Half this shit I make up and I'm still right. I learned that in the 50s. Do you have any reason to think that another well-known New Yorker who entered politics ever heard those lines?
Oh, no, he never heard. The only evidence that he knows the play existed is that when it was on HBO and it won all these Emmy Awards, I don't even think we were in the same category, but the first season of The Apprentice was also, it was the first season of The Apprentice that year, and he hadn't gotten any Emmy nominations, and he was very angry about it. And he said, there's this thing called Angels in America that I hear, and I hear it's long and boring and stupid. And so the only theater story I know concerning Donald Trump was told to me by a journalist, and I think it's true, I hope it's true, is that he went to see West Side Story when he was a teenager with a friend of his. They were the two bullies in his high school, and they went to see West Side Story because they heard it was about guys beating up Puerto Ricans, I think. So he thought that sounded like fun. So he went to see West Side Story, and what they took away from watching West Side Story is that they wanted switchblades. So he and his friend went. I think this is a true story. I don't know. It's a good story anyway. They went out in Times Square after they watched West Side Story. This would be 1957, and they bought switchblades and then brought them to the school the next day, and were holding up kids for lunch money, which we know that he actually did frequently and was suspended several times for doing. And he was suspended because he had a switchblade, and the other kid was suspended. And the kid's father called Fred Trump and said, or Fred Trump called the other kid's father and said, look, I think our kids are getting into some sort of deep water. I think we should send them both to military school. And the other kid's father said, I think you should send Donald to military school, and hung up. So he sent him to military school. So in a certain sense, Stephen Sondheim and Leonard Bernstein and Arthur Lawrence and Jerome Robbins are responsible for the Babylonian mud devil going to military school, which has to have had something to do with turning this, severely damaged sociopath into a severely damaged sociopath that was going to wind up becoming, the would-be dictator of the United States. Anyway, so there you go.
So the magic of the theater.
Yes. Other than that, I do know another, but I'll spare you. But I know another story. There was a play called Other People's Money, and an actress who was in it said that Trump started showing up over and over again to see the play. And it was a play about how awful people like Donald Trump are. But he was very upset that he wasn't mentioned in the play when it was long lists of terrible people like Donald Trump, but they had forgotten him, like Carl Icahn and people like that were mentioned, and Mike Millikan, but not Trump. So Trump started showing up at the play over and over again and trying to find a way to get to the playwright to say, could you put my name in that list? And then the company was called into the green room, and they were told, we've got a mystery investor that's going to move the play to Broadway. And the cast said it was Donald Trump, because he'd called them all up and said, will you please put my name in the list? And the guy said yes. And of course, the check bounced and the play never moved. So I think that's it. That's all I got.
Well, striking off on that, though, because you wrote about Roy Cohn. As a playwright, how do you thread the needle between presenting a character who can be hateful, sick, and despicable, and also uncovering what drives them, the twisted soul underneath that is still a beating heart?
I mean, I've said this a lot. I have always thought, right now I'm writing something about a severely mentally ill person, and it's the first time I've attempted to do it. I wanted to write this because I wanted to sort of face down my own terror of mental illness. I've always felt that if I was going to write a character, even if the character was a terrible person, they needed to be coherent enough at their core so that their contradictions were organized around something that I could locate and identify. And I felt that that was true with Roy, that he was clearly a malevolent human being, but somebody who had certain recognizable characteristics, identifiable characteristics. He was a person of considerable loyalty. Mm-hmm. He was a genuinely devoted anti-communist. I mean, he hated communism ideologically. It wasn't just a cynical ploy on his part. So I felt like it would be possible to write a character like that. A person like Ronald Reagan or Donald Trump is another kind of challenge because, in a certain sense, there's no there. A borderline psychotic personality is too much a creature of contingency and proximity, and I still sort of feel that that's true. I would find it very difficult, I think, to write a character like Trump, and Shakespeare already did it. There's Iago, I guess, and Richard III, and Herman Melville did it in The Confidence Man. So the job's already been done.
Well, maybe What if he'd invest in the show?
He might. He could. I could ask him.
Let me ask about a different kind of character. We're in Illinois, of course. What did you try and capture in Lincoln and about Abraham Lincoln that, with respect to so many other treatments, others may have overlooked or not emphasized as much?
I mean, so much has been written about him that I don't think there's anything that was overlooked. I said no to.
Well, what drew you? What drew you?
Well, I mean, you can't not be drawn if you love democracy and you love this country. You can't not be drawn if you love human beings and great writing, and political genius. You have to be drawn to Abraham Lincoln because he was one of the greatest human beings that ever lived. I've always felt that. I felt really terrified at the thought of writing a character based on Lincoln because the thing that I feel defines the word genius is that it's somebody who's capable of doing something that most of the rest of us have absolutely no way of understanding how they did what they did. Lincoln is a political leader of great genius and also a writer of great genius. So I thought, all I can do in this is fail. And I really avoided it. The thing that turned the corner for me was Stephen was trying to convince me to do it, so he assembled all these Lincolnists from all over the country, all the major Lincolnists, and in a hotel in New York. Doris Kearns Goodwin sort of led the thing, since A Team of Rivals was the book we were basing the movie on. And I spent 3 hours with them, and the most extraordinary conversation. I was really struck, because I've always loved academia, and I've been to a lot of academic conferences, and I was really struck at how a lot of these people who were academics were incredibly generous with each other and supportive of one another, which is not always the case in academic conferences. And I thought, there's a spirit here in this room that's recognizably different than the spirit. If this had been a group of Hitler specialists, it might have been a very different kind of feeling. But there was a feeling of generosity and support. And after the conference was over, I talked to Doris, and she said, "So have you made up your mind?" And I said, I'm not sure. I still feel like there's no way to succeed in doing this, because how can you understand a mystery like this? And she said, that's exactly what I felt when I started writing Team of Rivals. And I can't guarantee you that you're going to succeed in doing this. I can only guarantee you one thing. You'll never regret any time you spend in the company of Abraham Lincoln. And that, I maybe go, that's true. And so I spent 7 years writing the screenplay, but I don't regret a second of it. It was, for me, a transformative thing. This is sort of corny, but it's also true. One of Lincoln's secretaries, I think it was Hay, it was maybe either Nicolay or Hay, said after he was assassinated, if the religious faith of the modern world, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, if the religious faith of the modern world is, if the secular faith of the modern world is democracy, then Lincoln is its Christ. And there are other Christs for democracy. There's Martin Luther King Jr., there are, Cesar Chavez. I mean, there are people who, Fannie Lou Hamer and so on and so forth. But I believe that there's never been a person who more deeply understood the meaning of democracy, the way that equality is the engine of democracy, the way that equality. I was just reading this interesting thing that Tocqueville said, that there's a kind of an infinite place where liberty and equality are not in opposition, but actually become a single thing. And I think that Lincoln was born or grew to understand what that place looked like. And his articulation of these ideas, the second inaugural address, is one of the greatest things any human being ever wrote. So, and then, I got to work on the movie with Steven Spielberg, and we got like the greatest actor ever, who actually looks like Abraham Lincoln. I mean, that's the weird thing. He didn't need to wear many rubber parts on his face, and they did, a lot of the heavy lifting.
I think you've written one of the great rallying cries from the heart of the 20th century. I'm going to take the honor of reading some of your words here when you wrote maybe the most oft-quoted lines of the play, Angels in America. You wrote, "This disease will be the end of many of us, but not nearly all. And the dead will be commemorated and will struggle on with the living. And we are not going away. We won't die secret deaths anymore. The world only spins forward. We will be citizens. The time has come." How do you feel about that today?
Sometimes I think the play has an optimism that, I know that it has an optimism that I sometimes can't locate in myself anymore. I've said for a long time now, I think that hope is a moral obligation. I think that hope is not a feeling state. It's a choice. It's an action. I think that I believe in the improvability, not the perfectibility of the world, but in its improvability. I believe that human beings have a miraculous capacity for compassion and discernment and self-sacrifice and generosity. And I believe still that the majority of people on this earth are walking, talking, breathing manifestations of all that's best about humanity. And I also think that there is a peril to the world and a peril to our republic. And it's grown and grown and grown. And, I don't need to rehash any of that. We live in an absolutely terrifying time, a time that when I wrote Angels in America, I never imagined I would be living through, or that any of us would be living through. And, it's very plausible to say right now that we all may be gone within, if Vladimir Putin really just is serious about dropping nuclear weapons, I hope he's not. But if he is, we could really be facing Armageddon. But if that happens, then that happens. There is a lot that we can do while we're waiting to see whether things that we have no control over are going to happen or not. There's a lot that all of us can do, and there are obviously people in this room, my fellow recipients, and you, and there are things that we can all do to keep fighting. It's what we say in Passover, in every generation, Pharaoh comes back and says, "I'm not dead yet," and we have to fight and we have to liberate ourselves all over again. And it's exhausting and it's hard, and you get older and it gets harder. But I still have, I believe the world was, I'm not a religious person really, and I'm an agnostic. I'm an agnostic Jew. Martha Nussbaum, who is, of course, one of the prides of Chicago, calls herself a Kantian Jew. And I'm not sure exactly what she means by that, but I'd like to think that I'm that too. I don't know whether there's a God, but I sort of think that there may be, and I think that the world must have been created for some purpose, and I can't believe it was created for the purpose of simply destroying itself. And so I have kind of very tough sort of hope and a belief that we will, I can't wait to get back home tomorrow morning so I can watch the January 6th committee, one of the best shows in the history of American entertainment, do its big finale. I'm so moved by that. And I'm so, people our age remember Watergate, and they remember those hearings and those people, and Barbara Jordan and Sam Ervin. And democracy is incredibly fragile, and it's incredibly hard to kill. I mean, look at what just happened to Alex Jones today. I mean, good for those people on that jury. $1 billion to that, drive that monster, So that's, I wrote something. I felt like I should say something. It's very short, don't panic.
Take as much time as you,
But I just wanted to,
please. Are you kidding? Yeah.
I mean, this means so much to me because I really have a genuinely deep love for this city. And I second what my fellow honorees have said about the absolute importance of libraries. I grew up in the Deep South library. I mean, I grew up in a house packed with
Lake
books.
Charles, Louisiana.
Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Yeah.
But the local library was a sanctuary for me, a haven for me. So being asked to come and help celebrate a library and being honored by a great public library is incredibly meaningful to me. And I've been thinking a lot about Carl Sandburg, who I have read all my life. So I just wanted to write this as a way of saying thanks. I write about politics and history, and politics and history are in pretty much everything I write, not because I have anything like confidence that what I write will get people to take certain actions or to see the world a certain way. I'm actually quite glad that I have no such confidence, since I wasn't elected by anyone to wield power, and I often wonder if I know what I'm talking about. I work in theater and film, I guess. I like having a pension and health insurance. But in my head, I'm still a playwright. I work in theater in part because if I do my job well, if I figure out how to really set the dialectic spinning, not only do I not need to be right, it's useful if sometimes I'm wrong, as long as I maintain a sharp awareness of my errant imagination. I write about politics and history because I can't see the world without them. Among the many means human beings have invented to try to wrest meaning from the agonies and comedies of existence, politics and history are most congenial to me. Like many citizens of a democracy, I try to understand the world by thinking about the nature and the passages of power along communal and internal pathways, guided by memory, by remembrance, by the witnesses of the dead and the tales of the tribe. It seems to me that the poet, whose name adorns this prize, made no bones about his reliance on these frameworks, these epistemological lenses, as he did his job, which is the same for all artists. You find something true, at least in the moment of discovering it. You find some way to make this squirming, ineffable, divided, frantic to escape thing, the truth, into something vivid, a dream or a nightmare, something an audience can tear into, puzzle over, put away, and someday return to, or consciously or even completely forget. And once that's accomplished, you find or you manufacture an audience you can share it with. So I want to say thank you for this beautiful honor, named after a poet who, if he'd never written anything other than Rutabaga Stories and the first 2 volumes of his Lincoln biography, would still retain the very warm place he has in my heart, a place he's always shared with this glorious city. And now, before the woman from one of Sandburg's poems rises up and shouts, "Oh Lord, you made the night too long, I'll say good night and many thanks, and the midterms are coming, and oh Lord, deliver us."
Tony Kushner, thank you for your life's work, and thank you for honoring us by accepting this award that means so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Tony Kushner. That concludes this year's Chicago Public Library Foundation Awards. Thank you for tuning in and celebrating with us. No matter where you might be watching, we know you have a story to tell, and we hope you'll feel inspired to share it. And remember, Your free local library is a great place to find inspiration. Good night.